How inflation destroys your savings. This article is about the gap between the number in your account and what that number can actually buy. Purchasing power, real returns, and which vehicles have historically protected wealth against inflation. The core problem is that most people track their account balance. The balance going up feels like progress. But if the inflation rate exceeds your savings rate, every month of balance growth is also a month of purchasing power loss. The discipline is real. The vehicle is costing you. Purchasing power is the quantity of goods and services a unit of money can buy. When CPI rises 5%, that basket of goods costs 5% more. If your savings didn't grow by at least 5%, you are relatively poorer, even if the account balance grew. Nominal return versus real return. Nominal is what your bank reports. Real is nominal minus inflation. The table shows the range, from positive 2% real return when savings beat inflation to negative 5.5% when the gap is wide. Evaluate every investment by real return, not nominal. The rule of 72 applied to inflation. Divide 72 by the inflation rate to find how many years until purchasing power halves. At 5% inflation, that is 14 years. A 30-year-old with savings earning below inflation can have half the purchasing power by 44. This is not hypothetical, it is arithmetic. Why cash is a long-term loser. Savings accounts almost never consistently beat inflation over long periods. When central banks cut rates, savings yields drop immediately. When inflation is sticky, the gap widens. The number doesn't fall, so it doesn't feel like a loss. But purchasing power drains month by month. The inflation-debt relationship is worth understanding. Fixed-rate borrowers benefit from inflation. Their real debt burden shrinks while their income nominally rises. Savers holding cash are on the other side of this. This is why central banks raise rates to fight inflation. They are closing the gap between savers and borrowers by making borrowing more expensive. Assets that protect against inflation. Equities with pricing power. Real estate where rents track inflation over time. Tips where principal adjusts with CPI. I-bonds with inflation-adjusted rates. Commodities that rise with general price levels. None are perfect, but all of them beat cash over 20-plus year periods in most historical environments. Equities as inflation protection. Companies that can raise prices as their costs rise capture inflation in their revenues. Broad equity indices have outpaced inflation over most 20-year periods in developed markets. Short-term risk is real. Rising rates can suppress equity prices. But equities are a long-term inflation hedge, not a short-term one. Stay invested long enough for this to work. Real estate. Rents track inflation. Landlords raise prices as their costs rise. Property values rise with the broader price level over time, especially in supply-constrained areas. REITs provide this exposure without the direct landlord responsibilities. Liquid, diversified, income-generating. Tips and I-bonds. Tips adjust their principal with CPI. You are buying inflation protection built into a government bond. Positive real return guaranteed when held to maturity. I-bonds cap at $10,000 per year per individual, but offer inflation-adjusted rates with government backing. These are capital preservation instruments, not growth. Commodities and gold. Raw materials often rise with the general price level since input costs are part of what drives inflation. Gold has a long historical association with inflation protection, though the correlation is inconsistent over short periods. Access via diversified commodity funds rather than single positions. No income, purely price appreciation. A simple framework. Emergency fund and high-yield savings. 3 to 6 months expenses. Long-term savings and low-cost equity index funds. REITs for real estate exposure if accessible. Annual check of real return, nominal return minus inflation. If consistently negative, change the vehicle, not the discipline. How to calculate your real return. Take your investment or savings return for the year, nominal. Subtract the inflation rate for the same period. Positive result. You are building real wealth. 0. Treading water. Negative. Losing purchasing power even if the balance looks fine. This is the one calculation that tells you the truth about your financial position. A real example. 3 years of saving £400 monthly into a 1.8% savings account, while inflation averaged 4.2%. Real return, negative 2.4% per year. After 3 years, roughly 7% cumulative real loss. Account balance grew. Purchasing power shrank. Discipline was real. The vehicle was wrong. Emergency fund versus long-term savings. The emergency fund belongs in a savings account. Liquidity matters more than return here, and the real return cost is the price of the liquidity. Long-term savings held in a savings account beyond 2 years is the mistake. The treatment for each is different. The error is treating all savings the same. High-yield savings accounts can beat inflation during high-rate environments. When they do, your emergency fund earns a positive real return. But when rates fall, yields drop fast. Inflation lags. The advantage disappears. High-yield savings is correct for its purpose, short-term cash and liquidity, but not reliable as a long-term wealth vehicle. The psychological trap. Cash feels safe because the number doesn't go down. Equities feel risky because the number fluctuates. But over long time horizons, the real risk profile reverses. Holding cash guarantees purchasing power loss. Holding equities introduces short-term volatility, but has historically beaten inflation over 20-year periods. The feeling of safety is real. The safety from purchasing power loss is not. What good looks like? You track real return annually. Emergency fund is in high-yield savings. Long-term savings are in index funds and REITs. The signal to change is consistent negative real return, not a single bad year, but a pattern. When the signal fires, you change the vehicle. The discipline of saving is correct. The vehicle it sits in is the variable. The one number to track, real return. Your investment return minus inflation. Every year. It tells you immediately whether your purchasing power grew, held steady, or shrank. Full article at realsyllabus.com with the complete breakdown. Purchasing power, rule of 72, nominal versus real, and which assets have historically beaten inflation.